The Deep End.
The Deep End.
The Deep End.
With Ed Robinson.
The Deep End.
Hey, hello everybody. This is Ed Robinson, and welcome to the Deep End podcast. And my sister Karen is always sharing things with me, and she shared, before I introduce you to my guest, she shared with me a couple of acrostics or acronyms, and I thought it was very appropriate. One is the word N, E-N-D. Just think about the word N. Most people, when you think of the word N, everything just kind of stops right there. But in this case, she was reminding me that effort never dies. Effort never dies. My mother used to always tell us all the time, nothing beats a failure but a try. So you just keep on trying. And then the other acrostic that she shared with me was no. And no just simply means the next opportunity. But before we jump into the deep end, I want to give you a Lifeguard Tower moment. And all of you know that each episode I try to begin with a Lifeguard Tower moment. Basically, what is something that we can do for someone else? So this week, I want you to be on the lookout for a United States Postal Service worker, a mail carrier, someone at the customer at the front office or so. And I want you to do something nice for them, whether it's, giving them a card, whether it's giving them dinero or money, or just letting them know that they're doing an outstanding job. They catch a lot of flack, if you will. I want you to go postal in a good way and do something nice for them. Also, I just want to encourage you to connect with me on Instagram and Facebook. And then also we're moving over to YouTube. So I need you to go to YouTube and then subscribe to the channel. And on today, I am joined with a very special, I call her a prominent, a very dynamic individual in the person of Dr. Reyna Raya. She is a proud graduate of USC School of Pharmacy. She is a practicing pharmacist. And the theme for today's episode is beating the odds. And perhaps you may find yourself in a situation where you feel like your back is against the wall. You might even feel that the chips are down, or you may even feel like you've been dealt an unfair hand. And on this particular episode, we're going to hear an inspiring story that I think that will motivate individuals for generations to come. And so I'm very grateful that she pressed forward with courage. And so again, we want to encourage you to give you something that will help you along those lines. So Dr. Reyna, welcome to the Deep End with Ed podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm just really flattered and honored to be able to join you.
You are more than welcome. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing pretty good considering the times we're living in right now.
So let's just jump right into the deep end with Dr. Reyna. So Dr. Reyna, tell me, where does your story begin?
Well, if you go all the way to the beginning, I'm actually an immigrant to this country. I was born in Mexico. I was brought here by my parents when I was a very young child. We lived in East LA for the first years that we lived here, and then we moved to Compton. So on my Facebook page and my Instagram page, my introduction says, I'm a Mexican girl from Compton, and that tells you everything you need to know about me.
Wow. It sounds like you have a proud heritage and proud culture.
I do. I'm very proud of both my cultures, my American culture and my Mexican culture. And I am proud that my American culture includes my formative years being in Compton, which I felt most of my long-lasting friendships and relationships were formed there during my schooling years. I think a lot of my character, my resilience, my stubbornness were all, they were born because of the environment and the situations that we had to survive.
Okay, so how old were you when you came here from Mexico?
I was probably under 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a toddler. Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Reyna, tell us a little bit in your own way about your family.
So I am now the oldest of 6 surviving children. I had an older sister who passed away when she was 4 months old, and I had an older brother who passed away at the age of 22. So now I'm the next oldest, and we had a very conservative, traditional Mexican upbringing. We spoke English from the gate out and Spanish from the gate in. My father thought it was rude for us not to respect our elders, and they didn't speak English, so we had to communicate in the language that they did. So we were very cognizant of sort of that division of cultures when we were at our home. Fortunately for us, we grew up in Compton in a situation that was very unique with our neighbors. And so, I think that is a situation that was a blessing, and it added a lot to both my sisters, my brother, and I's just growing.
Okay. And you said earlier that you were from a very divergent background. And speaking of that, there's a lady that speaks so glowing and so very well and well-spoken, and just, so to speak, is enamored with you. And her name is Claudia Perkins, who happened to be one of our mutual friends. Tell us about Claudia. How do you know Claudia?
So Claudia and I, we lived in Compton for a little while in one address, and then my father finally decided to purchase a home, and he purchased it on Gibson Avenue in Compton. So if you're familiar with that area at all, our street used to be a cul-de-sac.
Okay.
And the houses, there were no houses in front of us because it's the 710 freeway.
Oh, yes.
So there were only there's 4 houses on the street, or there were four houses, but one faced the other direction. So we didn't really count that house. Our house was the next house, and we were a Mexican family. The next house was Claudia and her mother, who had just moved here not long ago from Louisiana. And then the third home was a Samoan family. And so we had this incredible mixture of people there, but we also formed some incredible friendships. So Claudia and I met the summer before the 8th grade, and you could not find 2 more different people. She's a single only child at the time. And, I have 6 siblings. And so I think the word that she used to use was, I was fast. And it wasn't that it was just, I think I was a little more worldly than she was. And so for 100 reasons.
Or maybe she meant fast by you were real smart. You got it real fast.
Yes, we're going to assume that. But I think we didn't know each other. And I thought, oh, she's so spoiled. She's an only child. And I think she probably thought the same of us. But before school started, somehow or another, we became friends. We are still friends to this date. That is my family. In January, I had COVID, and she was one of 2 people that came to my house, brought me food, checked on me.
Thank you. That's okay.
I just feel everybody should have a friend like Claudia.
Wow.
When I talk about good people, and I've been blessed in my lifetime to be touched by so many good people, she's top of the line. She is one of the best. I think anybody who knows her knows that she has one of those genuine good hearts. She has been there for my children. She has been there for me. She's been there for my family. And I can't say enough good things about her. Yeah, she's amazing.
Well, it seems like you all had you have a deep relationship with Claudia, but it sounds like you also was exposed to, nowadays they talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, but it seemed like you and Claudia got that at a real early age.
We did. We were blessed to have that. Do you know what holidays were like on our block? There was a lot of food exchanging doors. We were taking things over, and they were bringing things over. And it was just a very inclusive neighborhood. To this date, we still are in touch with one another. Our children know their children. It's just it was an amazing time in our life when I think about it. Yeah, when I think about where we are, even in racial situations in the world right now, I think what a blessing it was that we grew up in that type of environment.
And it's amazing. We're going to learn a little bit more about your story as we continue to talk, but I just want to plug this also. When you look at where you and Claudia, as an example, came from, and we're talking about beating the odds. The 2 of you summarily have, in my opinion, beat the odds. She being an administrator with LA Unified School District, and then you being a pharmacist. So where did you go to high school?
We all went to Dominguez High in Compton. We went to Whaley Junior High. We went to Dominguez. Claudia and I were really lucky. This is where Claudia was the mover and the shaker of a lot of things. She found out when we were at Whaley that there was a program at our high school for students interested in going into medical fields. And so we had to be interviewed for this program. So she signed both of us up because whatever she did, I was right behind. And we ended up being accepted to this program, which meant that our high school consisted of us taking college classes with college students and for half a day. And then we would be bused back to our high schools and we would take our electives at our high schools. And that was all through high school. And so when we ended up in high school, when we finished high school, we had a lot of college credits already. So had I gone to college immediately after high school, I probably could have come in as a senior. I mean, not as a senior, but a junior or a sophomore, because we had all those credit classes we were taking. They were also giving us credit at college. Yeah, so it was an incredible program at that time.
Very, very impressive what the two of you were doing. And all thanks again to Claudia pushing you. And
oh, yes, absolutely. She wasn't going to let up. And for us, that meant getting up very, very early because we had to go get on the bus to get to the college. For me, it also meant I was working full time by then, and it meant that I would leave high school a little bit early to go make my 3 to 11 shift. And then I would come home and do my homework, sleep a few hours and get up in the morning and do it all over again.
Wow. So it sounds like your work ethic, again, I'm assuming stimulating all the way from emanating or coming from your parents, were developed at a very early age.
Yes. And I think that has continued throughout my life, but it was something that I modeled to my children, that if you were going to school, that was not an excuse to not be working. And it wasn't an excuse the other way. That was just our family structure. So we did, well, I didn't go to school at the beginning, but I worked 2 or 3 jobs, whatever it took to get the things that my children needed. Until it, was time for them to leave home. And then it was time for me to go to school.
So Dr. Reyna, let's go back to your high school years. How would you describe yourself as a student? Well, when you go back to your D-high days, how would you describe
Down for life. We were as a group. So in high school, we formed this collective group. We were all really intelligent nerds. We should have been, when you look at movies that I see about high school, and so we should have been the outcasts, but really we were actually quite popular at school. We were leaders of groups, of clubs and organizations. We were always involved in things. I think one of our friends, we got her to be the first Latina homecoming queen candidate. Just a lot of little things that I think back, I go, we were really groundbreakers. We weren't even thinking about it. We were just having a good time in high school, but we were very smart. We were collectively a very smart group. Everybody had very definitive ideas of what we were going to do at college after we finished. And so, I don't think we ever felt isolated or as outcasts, because our group was very, very tight, very tight. That same group, except for Gina Cross, who passed away a couple of decades ago, we're still friends today. We are still that group.
It's amazing. There's a Chinese proverb that says, when you drink the water, never forget the brook. Translated, remember those who have helped you along the way. And it sounds
Absolutely.
Like we're doing the same thing. Excellent. Yeah. So this theme episode, as you know, the episode for this theme, Dr. Reyna, is beating the odds. And I remember speaking with you the other day, and it was very profound. You said something along the lines, creating a blueprint for your sons. Can you tell our listening audience a little bit more what you meant by that?
So I had, like I mentioned, an older brother who passed away from a drug overdose when he was 22. He was also a gangbanger or a gang member. And I had other family members who were involved in gangs. I mean, that was, to be honest, a very real part of life in Compton at that time. And so when he died, I had a 6-month-old son that I was raising on my own. And I thought, this is not the blueprint I want for my son. I've got to actively go in, step in, think about this, and figure out how to create a different blueprint for his life. And so a lot of people call that a lot of different things: breaking the chains, ending generational curses. I wasn't that astute back then. I could just think of a blueprint, that I wanted him to build this foundation and this home built on integrity and ethics that were very different in a lot of ways from the things that we were surrounded with, and even some of the things that we saw at home. To be honest, I actually lived on my own from the time I was a teenager. And so part of my friendship with Claudia and my friend Gina and my friend Leah, who lived in Orange County, was that I lived in their home. Their parents took me in. And so I lived with one person for a period of time. I lived with another person for a period of time. And throughout that, Claudia was insisting I attend and finish high school, and so I did that. And by the time I finished high school, I think I rented somebody's little reconditioned garage. That was my first apartment. It's what I could afford. But even in that process, just kind of thinking, I've got to do better and be better so that I can teach my child how to create his own blueprint that is not based on what we've seen before. And so that's a challenge. I mean, raising kids in this day and age, I mean, it's a journey. And when you're raising them to break not just exterior forces, but interior forces, because sometimes family can step in and not create the optimal environment for your child. So I had to find people to model behaviors for my sons, men that I wanted them to look up to, admire, women that I wanted them to understand generosity of spirit. Emotions were not something to be ashamed of. Just, I had an older gentleman that worked at my job, Mr. James Matthews, and he was a retired longshoreman. He was probably in his 70s by the time I met him, 70s, maybe going on 80. And I asked him to teach my son how to tie a tie, because my son didn't want to wear a clip-on to a 6th grade graduation. And I said, can you teach him? He said, yes, but after he graduates, bring him back, because I'm going to teach him how to do it himself, because every man should know how to tie a tie and polish his shoes. And so he ended up inviting us to his church. We ended up joining his church. And so I have people like that, that really help me get that blueprint in order. And like all blueprints, there's times you got to erase little parts and rewrite little parts. And we did that. And we did that because there were people around us who really taught me. I was learning. I mean, I was a 19-year-old mother. I didn't know you think you know everything, but you don't know anything. And so I had to learn as well. As I was raising my son, I was also learning how to be a better person, a better mother, a better woman, a better daughter of Christ. So that's when I talk about the blueprint, those are the things that I talk about, that I think about.
I mean, that's powerful. And then you think about that old notion, it takes a village to raise a child. And, and Mr. Matthews and so forth.
Yes.
So Dr. Reyna, again, we're talking about beating the odds, and someone may be listening to this podcast and wondering about, the whole notion. So at 19, just stay with me for a moment. At age 19, did you project or in your wildest dream that you would be where you are today?
No, and yes. And I'll tell you why, because I knew I always wanted to be a pharmacist. And so because I couldn't go to college immediately, I took a job at a pharmacy. And so I became one of their corporate officers. So I had a decent job. I mean, I worked really long hours, but it was a decent job. But in the back of my mind, it was always, I'm going to get to school at some point and I'm going to be a pharmacist. And so the journey that it took to get there was not something I could envision But one of the goals was, yes, I always kind of thought I would get to be a pharmacist. Yeah.
And I know you now have two sons. Tell us about your sons. What's going on with them?
So my sons are, one of the things about raising children with character is that they're also going to disagree with you. And you have to accept that, because just like you want them to stand up to the world, they have to be able to come to you and say, I disagree.
I agree.
And so I wanted both of my sons to go to college right after high school because that's what I wanted to do. Both of my sons in turn came to me and said, that's not what I want to do right now. So one of them started a career in the military, and this will be his 20th year. He's an officer. He went in as an enlisted person. He's an officer now. Yes, he has a beautiful family. My youngest son went into law enforcement as soon as he was old enough to even fill out the application, and he has a successful career there. Both of them have since gone back to school and have their bachelor's degrees, with the hope of, one of them, it was actually starting the master's program. Yeah. So all in due time, all in due time.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the things I've had to learn is it's never on my time, it's on God's time.
Right.
So I have to sit back and kind of just, patience is one of the things that I've always had to work on.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you look back at the blueprint and what your amazing sons are doing as a mom, what does that do for you?
Oh, it's amazing. I remember watching that movie, Waiting to Exhale. And I told somebody once, I said, when they finally had their families, the first time each one of them had their families, I sort of felt like that was the moment where I could exhale. Because just to know that they're okay, that they're good, that they have somebody that is their partner in life, and to see them grow as parents, and to see some of the things that you taught them and they're passing that on to their children, is amazing. It's just one of the most beautiful things that you can witness. Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm very proud of both of them.
Yeah. Giving me goosebumps even as you. So tell us, what was your journey to becoming a pharmacist?
So when my youngest was finishing high school, I kept insisting to my older son, I said, look, I could not save a lot of money, but there's a little nest egg in case you ever decide to go to college. He said, well, I'm in the military now. The military will actually take care of my college education. He said, why don't you use that money? And so I said, well, maybe I will. And so I started really scaling my life back a little bit. I'll just give you for example, I used to have like season tickets to the theater. And I thought, well, I'm not going to give up the theater. So what I did was I became a volunteer docent so I could go see people and still watch theater and save that money. And so that money I started putting away.
That was strategic.
Yes, I'm not going to give up. And that's something that I think we forget, that you have to also treat yourself with kindness. You also have to gift yourself, the things that you love to do. And so I started doing, figuring out how I could cut corners and save money and minimize my expenditures. And so when my youngest son graduated high school, we both attended junior college together. And I got 2 degrees from there, and started scaling back work a little bit, because at that point I was working maybe 70 hours a week. And so I was accepted at Cal State Long Beach. I finished my first year very successfully. And then I was diagnosed with cancer that summer. And so when I went to the doctor, they told me that I had an invasive aggressive form of breast cancer. And the doctor's advice at that time was, she said, yeah, I would probably postpone school at this point. And I said, oh, I waited way too long to postpone anything right now. So I said, as long as God gives me breath and the will to get up in the morning, I'm going to be up and I'm going to be at school. Now, there was a point in time during chemo where I could not be in class in person. And so I had professors that allowed me to submit my paperwork electronically, and things like that. But I had a really tough year with chemo. And right when I finished chemo at the end of that first year, I was diagnosed with a brain lesion that had to be repaired immediately by some neurosurgeons over at Kaiser Sunset. And so that took me out. I had just come back to school, and then that took me out for a couple of weeks. And again, the professor was saying, you're probably, I mean, my doctor was saying, you're probably going to have to sit out this semester. And I said, yeah, I'm not the sitting out type of person. So I said, what do I have to do? I remember he told me, you cannot even carry anything more than 2 pounds. And so one of my sisters would come to school with me every day so that she could carry my books for me. We had a little bag on wheels, and she would carry them for me, because one of my biology textbooks alone would be, you know, close to 5 pounds. And so she came with me for a few weeks until finally it was deemed that I could do it myself. And in the process, I was applying to the School of Pharmacy at USC. I was accepted. The first 3 years that I was there, I was still undergoing either treatment or surgeries. We would time the surgeries during my breaks. So in the summer break and spring break and Christmas break, so that I could have the surgery. We would have the surgery immediately as soon as break started, so that I would at least have that week or two to heal before I had to go back to school. And, you know, here I am, living testimony that there's life after cancer. Yeah, so I graduated with my doctorate in pharmacy in May of 2015. At the age of 52, the oldest graduate that they had in about 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Reyna,
Yeah.
it's amazing. I mean, I'm just hearing your story. There was things I did not know. So the cancer, and then you said a brain lesion.
A brain lesion at the year mark of when I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a brain lesion that had to be repaired. Yes. Yeah, it was a journey. I just kept, honestly, when I was diagnosed, I had just finished this incredible, successful year. I was an honor graduate. You know, I had Latin honors already geared up, and I remember when she told me I was diagnosed, I just, my first thought was like, God, you are not going to make this easy for me. You're really going to make me work for this. But I remember never a point where I thought, why me? That wasn't even really a thought. It was like, okay, if this is what you want in my journey, then all I can do is find why you want me to take this journey. What is it that I can do with it? And that first year, we started an online event called Rock the Pink. My second year, I was appalled to find that USC did not have a breast cancer awareness event. And so with one of my professors, we thought, we've got to change that. Here we are with one of the biggest cancer centers on the premises, hundreds of pharmacy students, and we have no breast cancer awareness event, you know, something that is so prevalent in our cultures. And so we changed that. And actually this past Thursday, we had our 9th annual Rock the Pink event at USC. Yeah, it was amazing. And so we've had speakers from all cultures come and tell their stories, because that's what I wanted the event to be. Every woman to have a platform to tell her story, because you know, it's first of all, it's cathartic to the person that's telling their story, and it's almost this eye-opener even for family members that hear the story, because they're like, whoa, I didn't know that she was going through that, or she felt that kind of thing. This past week, we had a speaker, a young African-American woman that I met about 10 years ago. And she's a 25-year vet from the Air Force who's been living with metastatic breast cancer for 12 years in December. She was given a 3 to 5 year life expectancy. And so I want people to know about her. I want to know that even when it's metastatic, you can still live a lot of life, you know? And so that's part of sharing my story, because I want people to know that receiving a cancer diagnosis it's hard and it's a difficult thing to navigate. But there are a lot of people going through that with you, and there's a lot of life that can still happen, so.
Amazing, Dr. Reyna. Thank you very much for just being so vulnerable and sharing that with us. And I know someone is probably thinking the same question that I'm about to ask you. What got you through those very difficult health issues?
Oh, I really think it was always thinking about what we could do for someone else. It was faith. It was a lot of faith, because I just kept thinking, you brought me here. I know you're going to walk with me the rest of the way. And in the meantime, what can I do? I don't want to be blind to what God had in store for me. I didn't want to be so lost in the cancer that I didn't see what else he had in store for me. And that included, how do we turn my story or my journey into something that helps somebody else? And so I really stayed focused on that. I really stayed stuck on, let's talk about this with other people. Let's help other people. Let's make it the norm that we're discussing it, and not that, because even in my journey, I met a lot of women that didn't talk about it because they were still embarrassed by it. And so I wanted to normalize that a little bit. And I think I was just so busy doing all these things that I didn't allow myself too much self-pity. Although I had one moment, and I remember crying to my son. My older son had come home. My older son was in Iraq when I was diagnosed, and that was probably one of the hardest moments of the whole journey, was having to call him and tell him, and he's so far away and couldn't really do anything, and I didn't want him out there worried about me over here. So he had come home finally on leave, and I was having my moment, and I remember just telling kind of feel like life is out of control a little bit, and people are washing my dishes and they're not putting them back the way I like them, just silly things. And I remember he listened to me. He got a little teary with me. My older son was also there, and after that he said, "Are you done? Let's get to living." And I said, "Okay, I'm done. I am done." I am done. So we give I have my moments. There's moments. And I think if anything, I would always tell people, have your moments, feel your feelings, feel your sadness, your anger, your whatever it is you have to feel, but don't get stuck there. Don't get stuck there, because you are essentially obstructing your own journey and your own health. Yeah.
Like what you said, to talk about it, share with others,
Yes.
mitigate the issue of shame, embarrassment, and
Yes.
awesome.
Yes. Our cultures, African-American women and Latino women, we're ravaged by breast cancer. And there's still not much in the pipelines in terms of treatment for aggressive cancers. Now there's just been an approval for a medication for triple positive cancer, which is groundbreaking. But that comes from all of us participating in research. And I know that that's a touchy subject for, a lot of us, because the history of research has not been very benign to us. But without research, and I'll give you a real good example. My mom, after I was diagnosed with cancer about 3 years later, actually, no, more than that, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. Now she's in her 70s. And she had almost an exact form of the same breast cancer that I had. And so I had been tested for markers when I was diagnosed. I tested for none. When my mother was diagnosed, they now tested for 12 different markers. And we still showed up with no markers on her end or my end. But most people would take that as, okay, well, we just didn't have any of the genetic mutations. As a scientist, I can tell you that we probably do, but because Latinas participate so in minimal numbers in research, they haven't found the marker that is inherent to Latinas. Just like African American women, they participate very, very scarcely in research. And so they haven't found the markers that affect us, you know? And so I think that's one of the things that is my life goal, to change that a little bit, you know?
So for those that are watching, or those that are watching or listening, what is the message? What is the takeaway you want them to learn from what you just said about the markers or lack of?
I want them to go online. There's places like the Army of Love, the Dr. Susan Love Foundation. There's a couple of websites. I'm drawing a blank right now on some of the names, but I know cancer.org has a couple of websites where they ask you, you don't have to, there's some where they will ask you to submit saliva. There's some where they will ask you to do questionnaires. But there's some, they're just asking you about your lifestyle, you know, what you eat, how much you exercise, that kind of thing. Because I used to participate in those things. And when I was diagnosed, I felt I was diagnosed with very aggressive cancer that 2 years before I was diagnosed had an 80% mortality rate. The year before I was diagnosed, 2 treatments had been approved because of research that other women had participated in, that saved my life, literally saved my life. And so, I mean, I'm here 12 years later, you know, and because of those women. And so I want all of us to be those women for other people, for our daughters. Wouldn't it be wonderful if our daughters grew up and there was no breast cancer anymore? That'd be wonderful. I have granddaughters now, you know, that I would love to eradicate it for them. So participate if you can. When it's a family member that's diagnosed and they ask for genetic testing, participate, just participate, you know. It may not save your life, but it can surely save the life of someone that you love. Yeah. And let's not forget, men also get breast cancer.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if there's a family member that has had breast cancer, your mother, your sister, it increases your chances. It's still always a lot less than women, but you know, just be aware. Be aware. Don't ignore things. Be your own advocate.
All right. So, Dr. Reyna, I know you're in the realm of pharmacy, and there's the drug epidemic, the opioid epidemic, if you will. As a pharmacist, is there anything that you wish that parents or teenagers or young people knew? And so what
I do. There is a correlation, and we know that about 80% of people who go on to become drug dependent on opioids had a legitimate prescription to begin. So that means that somebody had a root canal, went to the doctor, had it taken care of, and was prescribed an opioid and continued, you know, and then it gets to a point where people start seeing the doctor for any pain and getting more opioids. And there's going to be doctors. They don't care what they do to our communities. They don't care. They don't live here. You know, I work in South Central. The number of opioid prescriptions that we see on a daily is incredible. It's just astronomical. But we see opioid prescriptions for patients who went to have their teeth cleaned. Wow. And you're giving this person opioids. So as a consumer, as a parent, as just an individual, I would say go to doctors who, if they're good dentists, first of all, you don't need to have opioids. You know, they will treat you. My dentist, he won't give me anything more than Motrin, you know, because he already knows that I'm not going to have any more pain than that, if even, and I hardly ever even take that. But be alert to people who are prescribing your children opioids unnecessarily. You know, did they try something less addictive before they gave you an opioid? And I'm not, if you break your arm, you know what I'm saying? There's acute circumstances. You're in a car accident. There's situations where you're going to have to go to stronger painkillers, but that's not always the case. And especially doctors, I find that do not live in the areas where they are prescribing, tend to go overboard.
You see that correlation?
I do. And I've had a lot of conversations. Part of my job is I get it from both ends, because I have to explain to the patient why I have grave concerns about filling this medication for you. And I have to, on this end, have this conversation with this doctor to let him know that, hey, why are we jumping this patient to this medication and we're not trying these different steps? And I'll be honest, there's doctors that'll tell me that they're afraid to say no to patients.
Okay.
Or, and just a lot of different circumstances. So just be alert, try to have an honest conversation with your doctors about what you actually need. And that goes for any medication. Even if you're going for breast cancer treatments or, any chronic disease, you be part of that conversation. I don't want my doctor talking over me. You need to be talking with me about what we together are going to decide is best for my treatment. That's really important.
I'm so encouraged to know that there are Dr. Reynas that are on the front line and so to speak, between the end user and the patient as well as the doctor. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So Dr. Reyna, as we get ready to wind down this episode, I want to kind of do what I call a lightning round, so to speak, where I'm just going to throw some things at you. And you just give me a choice. So Dominguez or Centennial High School?
Don's for life. Dominguez, of course.
Going out for a meal or preparing a meal?
Preparing a meal.
Football or baseball?
I would say neither. I would say hockey, but if I had to choose, it would be football.
You're a hockey fan?
I just became one a couple years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Babies or teenagers?
Babies.
Okay. And
babies.
Lastly, what about spending or saving?
Saving.
Okay.
Saving.
Thank you, Dr. Reyna. I always like to close out each episode with what I call a coachable moment. That is, one or two takeaways for the listening audience. I'm going to yield to you. Do you have a coachable moment or something you would like to share with the listening audience, especially as it relates to beating the odds?
Yes, I would say be kind to yourself, but have a plan. Even if that plan has to change along the way, have a plan. And the kindness becomes that sometimes we set goals and then we beat ourselves up because we haven't accomplished A, B, and C by X amount of time. It's okay. It's okay. You're going to get there. Just don't lose sight of where you want to get to, but in the process, be kind to yourself.
And have a plan. And there's an old saying that I'm going to say in this case, he who has a plan is in command. It sounds like Dr. Reyna Raya certainly had a plan and still have a plan. And I want to thank you, Dr. Reyna, for taking the time to just share this information with us as we're talking about beating the odds, and especially someone who grew up in Compton and surrounding areas. I want individuals to know that just like Dr. Reyna did it, you can do the same thing too. So Dr. Reyna, if individuals want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, I have, they can always email me at reynaraya@gmail.com, or they can find me on Facebook and Instagram. It's just my name on both of them.
So again, Dr. Reyna, thank you very much. And we appreciate you being an outstanding odds beater. So thank you very much. And then
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Special thanks to your sons, what they're doing, and then especially the one that is serving in the military. And I just want to encourage everyone that's watching this again, share with us, connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Deep End with Ed. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm asking you to subscribe to the page so you can get updates and alerts when we do have these updates. And we're very grateful for everyone. I want to give a special shout out to my production team, Nicole Robinson and Dr. Danielle Robinson Jenkins. Also, a special shout out to a good friend of mine, Rodney Friend. He's the one that actually did the jingle for the music that's on, that comes on, as it relates to the song, The Deep End. I can't sing, so I'm not going to sing. I really thank you. And just remember that the Deep End podcast is a beyond the conversations with life.